Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be talking about Oxalis Triangularis. I'm going to be talking about how to look after it, and also I'm going to show you how you can propagate it as well. So this plant here might not look like much at the moment, but I purposely put mine into a dormant state because that's the easiest state for you to do any sort of propagation. But I'll first of all talk about the care of this plant and how to look after it. So Oxalis Triangularis is probably one of the easiest houseplants to look after, but it can sometimes be a little bit misunderstood. So the reason for that is its dormancy. It has got dormancy to it. It needs to have a dormant period every few years, ideally once a year, otherwise it's not going to grow at its best, and some people confuse that dormancy period with the plant dying. Now the dormancy period for this plant is a bit unusual. It's high temperatures, but it's also low temperatures, and it's also to do with watering as well, so it can seem a bit random as to when it goes into dormancy, but generally I tend to make mine go dormant in winter. That's because I have very low light levels in Scotland here, and winter dormancy works best for me because the great light levels over summer that we have here far in the north and the cool summer temperatures are ideal for this plant. So this plant likes it only around 20 degrees Celsius. It doesn't like it too hot. If you're going above 25 degrees Celsius up to 30, you're going to get dormancy. So if you're growing this in a warm climate where your house temperature is about 25 degrees, don't put it in the full sun. That extra heat will cause this to go dormant. But if you're growing it somewhere like Scotland where it's cold, and your house temperature is only about 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, then I would give it some good light levels. Bright indirect light is the best. But what makes this plant so easy to look after is it can tolerate a lot of different conditions. So when it comes to light levels, this can handle almost complete shade, and it can also handle bright sunshine as long as it's not too warm. But it does do best in bright indirect light, so maybe some morning direct sunshine or afternoon direct sunshine, but protection from the midday sun, and just generally lots of light. That's where you'll get the nice purple colour in the foliage. If you don't give it enough light, it can go completely green. As I say, it can actually grow in low light conditions, but it won't grow as well, but it will survive, and it will probably go more of a green colour. So when it comes to watering, one of the things that makes this so hard to kill is the fact it can go dormant and it can survive drought. This plant, for example, I haven't watered in 4 months, yet it's still alive. It might look dead because it's dormant, but the roots on the ground are going to be completely fine. And even though I've not watered this in 4 months, it is actually starting to grow a little flower shoot just there. So that's an indication to you that underwatering isn't a problem for this plant. What you'll find is if you do forget to water this and it starts looking a bit sorry for itself, what you can do is just cut off the old foliage, start watering again, and it should put up a nice new floss of leaves and start looking nice again. Now, because of the bulbs that it has these kind of fleshy bulbs. These fleshy bulbs allow the plant to store a little bit of water. So if you do forget to water it for a week or two, the leaves will probably wilt, but the plant probably won't die. It will come back no problem because it's got this this water stored in the bulb, so it will come back okay. If you do leave it dry for too long, it will go into a dormant state and it will look like this, where its leaves are all died off. As I say before, just cut it all back and give it some water and it should respond and come back no problem. The only thing you can do with this is you can overwater the plant, so whenever you're watering it, make sure you have it in a pot that has holes in the bottom to allow excess water to drain out. And if there's a saucer under there and it collects the water, make sure you empty that saucer of water. You don't want it sitting in water because the roots can go rotten. But generally when it comes to watering, it's not too fussy, and if it does go too dry and it looks like it's died, it will come back. Just start watering it again normally. So when it comes to the dormancy of this plant, it does need to have a dormant phase. It would naturally have a dormant phase in the wild. If you keep growing this for several years with it not going dormant, it will eventually go dormant by itself. That's what's happened with my one. I've had this growing for 2 or 3 years now. It started off with bulbs, just 3 of them about this size, and there's probably going to be about 20 or 30 of them in now. It does grow quite fast once it gets going. So as I say, mine grew for 2 or 3 years, started to look a bit unhappy, stopped putting out new growth. That's normally a sign that it needs to have a dormant phase. What you can do to make it dormant is, if you're in the summer, in its warm environment, put it somewhere really hot and sunny, stop watering it and let it die back to its roots. If it's in the winter, just do the same, stop watering it, but put it in a cooler location and it will also go dormant. You then just want to keep it dry for about 2 or 3 months and then start watering again, making sure it's around the 20 degrees Celsius range, and it should come into growth with much more health and should be looking much nicer for it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to separate this plant, break it apart. I'm going to separate all the bulbs and the roots and propagate it up into new pots so I can have more of them. These plants can actually grow outside in quite a few countries. They can survive around -5, but if there are moults underground, they can survive colder than that. So they're not really a frost hardy plant, but because they grow underground, they can quite often survive in the little bulbs with even though it's frosty and cold above. So I'm going to plant a few of these in my garden. We get -15 here occasionally, so I'm not sure if they'll survive, but I'm going to plant up a few of them, mulch them, and hopefully they'll survive year after year. Certainly if you're on the coastal area of the UK, these should grow no problem outside. They'll just get killed off by the frost in the winter and they'll come back from the bulbs in the summer. So when I start breaking this apart, you'll notice there's actually two types of kind of roots or bulbs. You'll get these bulbs here, which are the ones that can stay dormant for a long time. These are the best ones to propagate from, but these plants often grow big white succulent roots as well. Those large white succulent roots are part of the reason that they can survive a week or two without any water, without wilting too much, because that's where the water's stored. If it's a short dry spell, they'll use the water from those white succulent roots. If it's a long dry spell, they'll go completely dormant and they can stay in this dry form with these little bulbules for several months. So I'm just going to break this apart, take off some of the old foliage, and I'm just going to take it out of the pot, break apart the compost, and see what we've got in here. So you can see there we've got several bulbs starting to appear on the side. As I say, there's only 3 of these originally. I'm going to separate all the bulbs, but there might also be some white succulent roots as well. So I'll start breaking this apart, and there should be several in here. So you can see there's lots of them. So this is the big white succulent root that I was talking about at the bottom. They use these big white succulent roots to store a lot of water. They're not great for propagating from. It's the bulbules you'll want. So they'll be like this. You can plant them whole, or you can actually just snap them into pieces and they'll also grow. This can be a bit of a noxious weed if you're growing this in the garden and you're trying to get rid of it, because any little tiny piece of these bulbs will grow back. Even a tiny little scale off of this can regrow. So they can be quite hard to eradicate if you do have them in a garden location, but the good thing is if you're propagating them, they're very easy to look after. And you can see this has been in here for a few years because some of them are very long, such as this one here. So I can just snap them in half and make several plants out of these. So I'm just going to go through this all, separate all the bulbs, so I've got a good selection for propagating from. So we should be able to actually find the original plants. This was already potted up when I got it, but I suspected there was about 3 plants. I've found one of them, which is this one here, and I'll see if it's 2 in here or 3. So that's the second plant there. It does look like there was originally just the 2 plants. So what I'm going to do is going to put these back into the original pot. I've now created a lot more space for them. There was all these that came out of there, so I've got plenty for propagating, and that's going to really thin out how many is in that original pot. They're going to grow a lot better for that. They're getting a bit choked out with the number of plants. You need to separate them every now and again just to keep that the healthiest. With these, I'm actually going to break a few of these sections off, just to give me some more propagation material. And these are quite strong plants. As long as I leave some of these bulbs on the top, there's so much stored energy in the bulbs and also with this big fleshy root. Now these are going to grow back no problem, so I can cut these back quite hard, and you can actually see this one is starting to regrow already. It's got those nice shoots just starting to appear. So I'll just get my compost sorted now and start potting them up. So one of the good things about these plants not being fussy is that when it comes to soil, we don't need to worry too much about what kind of soil you're using. I would just use multi-purpose compost. You should be absolutely fine with that. If it's a multi-purpose compost which has extra water retention though, that could be a slight issue. You might want to add some grit or perlite to that just to aid with drainage. But normal multi-purpose compost should be fine. And if you're using garden soil, as long as it's free draining, that should also work. As I say, they're not very fussy, so it doesn't matter too much what you use. So I'm going to plant these up now, and I can use this as an example of maybe how much space you want for the plant. So this would have been roughly the size of the plant when these were planted about 2 or 3 years ago, and this is how big they grew in that time, but with all those side shoots coming off. So I've got a whole pot now full of all those side shoots that I can use for propagating. So one of these is actually probably enough for here. I'm going to put in 2 because I don't need hundreds of these plants. I just want to have like a big nice full pot, so I'm going to put both of these in here at opposite corners, but one of these would be plenty fine. This is a 1 litre pot, and 1 litre pot is enough for one plant. If you're starting them young and it's just the size of a single tuber, I would start with probably a 9 centimetre pot and then repot them into a 1 litre pot after about a year or 6 months. If it's an established individual plant, 1 litre should be fine. If you probably put these 2 in a larger pot, 2 litres or 3 litres would be the ideal size, but I'm a bit short of space, so I'm just going to go ahead with a slightly smaller pot for the 2 of them. So as with every aspect of this plant, it's really not too fussy. When it comes to planting them, if you have got an established plant with a root on the bottom, you do want that root to be facing down and have these little bulb sections facing up. So I'm just going to place them at the edge of the pot there. If you're just planting one plant, I would just put them in the middle. There's no reason to put them on the edge. I'm just doing it because I'm quite short of space with this pot. Now you just simply need to cover them in soil. Depth as well isn't too big an issue. As long as the bulbs are covered, I would try and have them about 1 inch underground. That's about a good kind of depth, but you can get away with 3 or 4 inches, and you can get away with having them near the surface, but having them covered about 1 inch in depth is best. And when it comes to these little ones as well, the orientation isn't too big an issue. You can kind of tell if you've got a section like this, the pointier bit or the narrower section tends to be the top. You can also kind of see how the bracts come up, that's the top up there. If you don't know which way to plant it, you can just put them on their side and they'll figure it out for themselves. Most plants are quite good like that. If you put them on their side, they'll grow up anyway and figure out what's up and what's down. And but if you can, plant them in the correct orientation. So I'm just going to pop this in the middle of the pot and then just basically top up with soil. And that's all I need to do to plant this. Now I just need to give this a water, put it in a location around 20 degrees Celsius on a bright windowsill, ideally not with too much sun, and just keep it well watered. This should start growing within 2 or 3 weeks, and within a month I should have a nice young plant. So that's all for this video. Hopefully that's been helpful for some of you guys. That's how to propagate these plants. Very easy to look after, very easy to propagate, and they'll last for several years. If they ever do look like they're getting a bit tired, don't worry, they probably just need a dormant period. Let them be dormant for a couple of months and they'll come back stronger and healthier than ever.